Welcome to the Deer Society podcast. Here's your host, Brian Lemke.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deer Society podcast. I'm Brian Lemke, joined by JJ Dukart and Brian Clary, and late season tactics. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see on the table there's a big buck sitting here. We talked last podcast about a buck that JJ was going to be going over to hunt in Wisconsin, and talked about some strategy and some chances. And lo and behold, fast forward to here we are. Buck is on the table, a buck that you call Longhorn. So we're going to hear that story, hear how that all went down, hear the strategy, talk about some continuing late season strategies here, and might even get into some talk about Second Rut and that kind of second breeding season, whether there is one, isn't one, what you should do to kind of take advantage of that or not. So let's first talk about this buck, Longhorn.
Yeah, so got the buck I was after in Wisconsin. Actually kind of a surprise. Buck showed up December of this year. I only had 1 year of history with him last year. Showed up, got some videos, stayed for late season, and then when the snow got too deep, he just moved off because we don't have the best food sources there once the snow is deep. So just had that 1 year history. Obviously shot Andre last year, so couldn't hunt this buck or pursue him. Just got some videos and kind of kept tabs of him for a while, and then this year it was kind of waiting on Longhorn. He's a really wide buck. I think he's like 22 inches wide here on this rack. Last year he had kind of a mainframe 10 with a little split brow. This year he's a mainframe 8 with double splits, so a little bit different. I would say probably the same size. Some ways it looks smaller, some ways he maybe added some mass, but kind of in that same ballpark, just real wide. When we saw him last year, first thing that came to mind was he doesn't have much tine length, but just these big long beams going out. So it kind of reminded me of a Longhorn, Texas Longhorn, but maybe we'll call him the Wisconsin Longhorn. I don't know if they have those there. So yeah, Longhorn it's kind of a cheesy name, but that's kind of what I was calling him. So he showed up in December 3rd, I think it was, and I was just glassing some fields, kind of fixing some binoculars actually, and saw this buck out there limping around, had big bald spots on his back. All the fur was gone on both sides. Last year he had a limp on his back left leg. I thought he died over the winter, or someone else shot him or something. Then he came back this year. He had not only that back left leg looked a little sore, but the front left leg now was badly injured. I think it's the shoulder. The shoulder looked really goofy. So just limping around really slow. Basically came back to the property I hunt for the food. He was in a primetime brassica plot, and then I left a little bit of standing beans. The farmer left a little bit up for us. So, we had that food source. We don't have a lot of snow this year. He basically looks really injured, thin, weak, basically came back for the food. So I knew once he showed up, it was kind of game on. Popped up a Novix, changed some reveal placement, used all that intel, kind of just kept eyes on him. And he wasn't moving far. So basically he was injured. Actually when I field dressed him, he was 135 pounds on the scale. So not a good situation for a buck like this. Heading in the winter, but you could tell he was just trying to keep that food, that protein, that nutrition coming in. So he was eating the brassica plot really pretty much every night. He'd sitting there for an hour and a half just eating. He really liked those beans too, so he was just staying tight, bedding in the swamp, coming out at night, and I just put some good sits on him with some questionable winds, playing the phase, using the phase as much as I could. We just kept getting those south winds. It was just south wind after south wind after south wind, which was not ideal to hunt this buck on that plot. So just doing my best not to get busted, and then tried to make a couple trips up to Wisconsin. It's a 2-hour drive, so I can't just hunt there any night I want to. So made a couple trips, and he came in that night, December 15th. Unfortunately, he sat in the other side of the plot for 15 minutes and didn't want to move. So I couldn't film him for a long time, and he gave me a shot right at last light as he slowly made his way in front of me where all the does were. So put a good shot at him, shot the new Prime RVX. That was the first blood that the bow drew, and he ducked a little bit. I'm still not sure what happened on the shot. It was a good location. He ducked a little bit, so it ended up spining him. I don't know if he he twisted or spun while he dropped, but, a lot of blood and obviously didn't go far, so put another arrow in him. It was over quick. That is Longhorn. So I think he's 5. I thought he was 4 last year, but it's hard to know when you got 1 year. Maybe he was 3, but I just keep looking at that video and the character. It just seemed like a 4-year-old buck, but regardless, it was the buck I was after. He didn't grow much, so that was, but it's just interesting and kind of cool story. So the number 1 buck I was waiting for came back, but just not in the way that you would think. So,
well, first off, congratulations. That's a sweet buck. I mean, he's got long beams. He's got some cool character on the outside of his beam, super wide, and those split brow tines are cool. And he's got pretty good mass. He carries through there too. So, beautiful buck. Congratulations. I want to jump back. So, you said you got a year history with him. He showed up last year. When did he show up last year?
I thought he showed up on the 13th of November, but it was early. It was like the first week in November. But because he showed up on non-cell cam, so in my mind it was like he was on the 13th. But I was looking back last week and found some non-cellular video of him, a couple days before that. So I was expecting him to show up basically in November. So all of November I was waiting, watching cameras. I was hunting in there a little bit up in Wisconsin and just waiting on the buck, and nothing ever showed. No shooters this year until December.
Gotcha. So this deer shows up last year, kind of disappears again, shows back up late season now, and you're able to harvest them. I think that, it's interesting to see that because we talk about that so often. These deer, especially mature bucks, will tend to do the same thing year after year after year. What was it like for you waiting throughout the whole year? I know you said you thought maybe he was dead. Did you have confidence that if he was still alive, that he was going to show up again towards that later part of the year?
I lost confidence when he didn't show up throughout November. It just seemed odd that it would be a month later than it was the previous year or more. Obviously, it made sense when I saw him limping around. Obviously, he got hurt somewhere. Maybe he ruts somewhere else. His rut range, home range, whatever you want to call it, is somewhere else. And then basically he just remembered, there's good food at this property. I'm going to head back that way. Maybe where he was hanging out didn't have, maybe it's just a big timber or swamp or something. I don't really know. Mm-hmm. So, in the back of his mind, he's like, I got to get back to that food source over at property X.
Yeah. So my next question is, we talk about late season being, can be one of the best times of year to hunt. We talk about the importance of food, the importance of cold weather, maybe some snow, especially here in the upper Midwest. This year, we're into late season. I mean, there's only a couple weeks of the season left. I know everybody's still hoping for snow and cold, and we just haven't got it yet. So it's been super mild. Like you mentioned, a lot of south winds, temperatures in the 40s, really. Thinking about that as somebody that still has a tag in their pocket, you're like, man, that doesn't line up for big buck movement or mature deer movement, bucks anyway. What do you think, if you had to sum it up, like what was the main thing that helped you be successful during that late season with the mild temperatures and not really ideal conditions for late season?
Yeah, I look at it like I don't get bummed when there's not really cold weather. I just think it extends the attraction of the green food source and doesn't really push them into those beans and corn like it would if we had deep snow. So I looked at it like, wow, this is a positive because now my brassica plot is available to this deer. He doesn't have to dig through 12 inches of snow. I got 6-8 videos of him on the reveals where he's actually pulling up turnips, eating the bulbs like on camera. So I got to watch that whole process as I was kind of requesting HD videos throughout this period. So I remember last year this buck showed up in that same plot, which had a little bit of the prime time on part of it. And he went to that exact same spot where I shot him the year before. That's where he obviously remembered where that plot was. But we got deeper snow. He came back a couple times last year and was digging for those brassicas. But eventually it just got too deep, and then that's when he left. So I looked at it like, well, he's not going to leave. Deep snow is not going to push him out. He loves this green source. He doesn't want to go far. So I felt like he was just going to stay there until deep snow came. So I actually like it. And even, Brian Clary over here on a nice green food source right now. And it's like, you're in the game because there's no deep snow. Like if you had 2-3 feet of deep snow, it wouldn't be a good end of your season. I don't think 'cause you don't have those beans and corn. So I feel like green can be better during all these late season warm-ups.
Well, I've been out, as much as I can be over the last couple of weeks with everything I got going on, but I've seen more deer on these late season sits with these south winds and these 40-degree temps, not in the corn, rather in these easy greens and the different forbs that I got planted and the rye and oats. All of those green food sources right now are highly nutritious, and they're packing on all of those vital proteins and nutrients as they're getting ready for the snow to come. But I sat last night and I had 25 deer at one time within shooting range of me, sitting in a blind, and it's insane watching them pump out of the woods at the exact same time of the day every day, staying for about an hour and then moving off into the timber. This is the time of the year that you can absolutely pattern deer. Not necessarily big bucks are coming out that early, but does, fawn, the younger bucks, it's just continual community attraction to those plots right now.
I also think there's advantage in not having snow because when there's snow on the ground, you can see deer obviously a long ways off, but they can see you forever walking in. So I actually don't like deep snow sometimes. I like cold. And deep snow can drive them into those standing grains, but sometimes it's hard to get in and out of your stands because you're just this silhouette walking through the woods and the fields too. So it feels like, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of advantage to not have snow too.
Well, the other hard thing about that deep snow, especially when you get cold here too, is like it gets crunchy.
Yep.
You sound like a Mack truck going through the woods trying to get to your stand or field or whatever it is. Brian, I'm interested to hear, so the spot that you're hunting, you have several different food sources planted in that kind of one area. So, you have easy greens, you have prime time, you have four seasons, you have rye, you have a lot of these different food sources. All these deer coming out, what are you seeing them? Are they focusing on one more than the other? Or what does that look like? What are the deer feeding on right now?
They're really hitting it. To be honest, everything right now, but their main focus when they initially come out, they'll go through the rye, oats. And then as the evening progresses, gets a little closer to sundown, I see them in the easy greens, which is the clover and chicory. But then I got that all lined with a test plot, so to speak, of a certain forb that stays green throughout the entire winter. It's a small brunette, and they are absolutely demolishing that mixed with that easy greens.
So you see them focusing more on like even a perennial clover kind of mix right now over like brassicas.
Yeah, and that's not to say they're not hitting the brassicas in that area. It's just they've already been through that area of the plot so heavily. Like we've got a very high deer population in that area, very outnumbered on does. But they hit that primetime plot so heavy earlier in the season that now they're just going through and picking scraps. Yep. So they've moved on to like I said, the forbs and the more of the late season hardy clovers.
Well, the good news for you is that, I know that you have reveal pictures and videos of some pretty good bucks there. Mm-hmm. I know they've been there in the daylight, but, in a situation like that, I know you've hunted a couple times not seen those bucks. The good news is just a matter of time. Like that's the best thing that you can ask for late season is you have all these deer. As long as you can get in there and out of there without bumping a bunch of deer all the time, like you have 25 deer coming out to a food plot, those bigger bucks are gonna come there. Like it's just a matter of time. And I know they're coming there at night and some during the day, but like when you're there, they're gonna come there. That is the best feeling in the world, especially this time of year. If you have a lot of deer coming out there, they obviously like the food source. Those bucks do too. But all those deer, they're comfort for those bigger bucks that are standing back there, laying back there. Like there's going to be a day, and I don't know if it even needs to be a drastic change of weather. There's just going to be a day where you're there, and that buck's going to show up with 25 of those other deer in the field.
Right. And that's the one thing that I have the hardest time with is because I'm looking through the lens on the camera most of the time when all these does and young bucks are intermingling and capturing the content of what their behaviors are. But the movement, like you've got all of those eyes and they're all within shooting range for the most part. I mean, that plot is 3 acres, but the blind is dead center in the middle of it. And I mean, it's 60 yards to any corner of that plot. So you're in the middle of it for sure. And the motions have to be so slow and diligent not to bump any of those deer when they're, 5 yards to 60 yards away from you. So that's the one thing I really have to pay attention to, being that there's so many deer in there every single night.
So here's a question for you strategy-wise, just kind of when that time comes. So when you're sitting there, you're in this blind. It's a hard-sided blind, 360 blind.
Yep.
Do you have the windows open? Do you have them all shut? What's your strategy there, before that kind of moment of the truth?
I'll usually have the windows cracked for the camera, because 360 blinds, if people aren't familiar with them, pull a bag, raises a window. And there's 13 windows around you, so you can shoot in all directions. I'll have 1 or 2 windows on my upwind side, never on my downwind side, just because usually there are deer behind me too. But when the wind is coming in there, it just kind of channels it and holds it. But then paying attention to the sight control with phase, I haven't been busted once sitting in there, and it's been probably 5-6 sits now with these heavy south winds and this late season strategy on that plot. And I haven't sat in that plot, all year until now.
So that big buck comes out tonight. How do you get away with, I think that, from what I've seen, just with some of the photos that you've shared and some of the strategy we've talked, he could come from a few different places, right?
Yeah.
If he shows up, what's it look like? He's coming out, there's 25 other deer in the field that are within 30 yards.
Yeah.
Like, how are you getting the camera set up, window open? Like, how's that all going down?
Camera gets placed in front of the window. Usually try to focus it in through the window first. Open that window as slowly as possible. And those blinds are, I'm a fan of them. They're absolutely amazing we're not affiliated with 360 at all, but they are completely quiet when you open the windows. So it's more the movement of that window sliding up, and every window has the ND filters on it so they can't see in, but I can see out. When I'm raising that window, it is, centimeter by centimeter. So if one of those bucks come through fast, it's going to be a tough game to play. But if they're out there feeding, I feel pretty confident that I'll be able to get that window open, set my shot up, get the yardage, and deliver a good shot.
Right on. Yeah, that's the best part about having all those deer there, but can be definitely challenging with all of them around too.
Yeah.
You got to go to shoot.
Well, it's self-filming too. It's, it adds a whole new aspect to it.
A lot of dynamics there.
So as I was hunting this buck, they kept going through my mind, I'm ranging, because I'm just thinking about Clary's situation here, where it could be a 5 to 60 yard encounter. I don't think you're going to shoot 60, but
40.
For these, like the kind of the prime area my shots were for this buck was in that 35-40 range, and I kept kind of debating, like, how low should I aim? How low should I aim? How much is he going to duck?
Yep.
If it's head up versus head down, I'd aimed kind of just low lung, top heart, and he ended up ducking and got a little bit high. I think I still hit lung because there was bubbles coming out, but high lung turned into artery, and then it ended up spining him somehow. I think he rolled. But how low would you aim on a 40?
And this is just something that I do every year. I'm aiming low. I religiously aim low, and I think that it's just because you have more room for error low than you do high. Sticker 10. I aimed low, hit him low, and I think my yardage was off a little bit just because a lot of things going on at that time, and that's not an excuse. But hit him low, and obviously was able to recover him. I've seen way more deer shot low. There's an artery that runs down along there. The heart's down low. You get up high, and if you hit them above those lungs, Like there's more room above the lungs and the vitals if you don't spine them. More room for error there than there is low. And I feel like, man, just not even shooting them, but like filming them, I would say, I don't know if it's 90%, but I bet it's up there that they will drop even if it's a little bit, you know, I mean, even if it's 1-2 inches or it could be 8 inches, seen them drop to or more. Yeah, I'm aiming even probably lower than most guys. Like I will shoot for the bottom of the heart every single time because I feel like if they don't move, then you're not hit them. But I feel like most of the time they're going to move, and I'm a guy that's religiously aiming low, especially late season when they're like they're out there. They're almost jumpy a lot of the time. Like, and you know they've been through this whole season. It's cold. They're out there feeding. Like I feel like they're just always even on edge a little bit at that point. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on it.
While I was sitting last night and I had all these deer around me, every time like 1 and 2 year old bucks would come together, because they're still sparring at this time of the year, every time they'd come together, you'd see the entire herd of animals do that quick drop and jolt. And it's just any of those quick sudden noises that they hear that aren't them feeding. You're exactly right. They're completely on edge right now.
Yeah, I was just trying to kind of get Brian's mind ready for the shot. If it's 40 or something, because I was looking at my footage, shot him at 38, ranged him right before. Big light did not coming. It's a little bit dark, so it's very illuminated in the video. I think it's at about the 30-yard mark, so those last 8 yards is when you could see him start to drop. So I'm thinking, 30 in, shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Your bow's faster than mine.
Yeah. Also shooting the RVX, but yeah.
And then maybe 30 to 40 is when they start to really. And the does, I kind of went frame for frame, and the does next to him too. I was like, I wonder if all the deer duck like the same speed at the same time, and they all. I would say even the younger does dropped quicker. At the 20, when my arrow was at about 20 to 30, the does started to drop. He had his head up, and then he started to drop when it was about 30.
Oh gosh, when I shot that buck over the reflection pond a few years ago, that was an 18-yard shot, and that thing dropped 6 inches in 18 yards.
Yeah.
Like that arrow, when you play it in slow motion, arrow mid-flight that thing dropped 6 inches and hit it high lung,
I filmed a deer one time that was in Saskatchewan, and now granted, we were on the ground in a blind, and this deer was shot at 10 yards. And he was on pins and needles. Like he's looking right at us, like high alert here. So not all circumstances are exactly like this one. But in 10 yards, and we played it frame by frame in slow motion, like that arrow was going right for the Boilermaker pretty much. So not high, not necessarily low, but like if you could stick an arrow in the deer, like that was where it was going. And that deer was 10 yards away. And we never recovered that deer because he ducked it. And it hit him high right in no man's land. Didn't get him in the spine, just below the spine. But I don't remember what the inch, drop was, but it was 8-10 inches for sure.
That's crazy.
In 10 yards. Now, again, that deer was super high alert and looking right at us and a lot of things. But like the amount that those deer can move is crazy. And it's just like you, JJ, like somehow, like the entrance on that shot isn't bad, but you got a spine, and it's just like. That's where a lot of guys, unless you have video of it, kind of make a mistake because they see the arrow hit or they see what they think is the arrow hit, and they don't think about what that deer could have been doing, how he moved. Like, not only are they dropping, are they turning, are they rolling, like, and what those organs do and how that, it's crazy. I've seen so many crazy things happen with a hit. That's why, again, after you shoot them, you have to really try to be patient, really try to be smart about how you recover them too, because I do think that there's a lot of deer that are lost that could be recovered if guys just took the extra little bit to really analyze the situation, and vice versa. But I think, I will never say that having to leave a deer is exciting, but I do, in a weird way, enjoy that part of it, because it's like, okay, you didn't just shoot them, like they're still part of the hunt after that. And I think that's a really crucial time, especially on a marginal hit, where you could, really sway the recovery one way or the other.
Absolutely. And I wonder if that, with JJ's, how it rolled like that. That deer essentially had 2 flat tires on the left side, back leg and front leg.
Yeah, maybe he didn't roll. Maybe they just gave out.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. when it dropped, when he dropped.
Yeah, that's a good point. He didn't want it. Yeah, interesting.
JJ, I got a question for you. So going back to Longhorn a little bit, you said you went in there and threw up a Novik stand. I believe that you had another stand that was on that food plot. So what made you go in and say, look, this isn't the right spot. I need to go in and hang another stand to have an opportunity at this buck? Because we're talking, this 1/4 acre food plot? There's a little bigger.
It's small, but it's long. So the first half is actually rye, which I just mow every year and it comes back. And then I'm going to do in a rotation to where next year I'll flip it. So then that rye portion will be the brassica in the prime time, and then I'll let the other half go to rye or clover, some type of perennial or something.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of some flipping, trying to keep the soil decent there. I had a stand at the entry point of the plot, kind of where all the timber that goes back into the swamp comes out into the plot, and then it's a long plot. And the prime time is on the far end of it, so they got to walk the length of the plot to get to that. It's a ladder stand, so back when I started taking my wife hunting, when she would actually hunt a little bit more, we would put up ladder stands. So I'm honestly not a fan of it. It's so loud and clanky, and I don't know, but it's in a good spot. So it's in a good spot right at the entry. But part of the hesitation going to that is like, man, that's a loud stand. I know these deer aren't far. It's super calm. I wanted to kind of get away from the transition and get out more towards the plot to where I could sneak in. They wouldn't see me. Actually kind of took the long way around, went way out past the plot, walked through the plot, and then came back to the stand from the opposite side instead of walking the trail, which is, we call it a golf cart trail or something that goes right next to the woods to the stand. That would have been the easy route, like just walk the trail, go up to the stand. But you can see into that timber 200-300 yards. So if the buck's sitting back in there, whether it's, on a close knob, he's injured, maybe he wants to stay close, or if he's back in the swamp, I just didn't want to bump deer. So I wanted to get further away from the bedding, which means, looking back, if I would have been able to sneak into that ladder stand without bumping deer, there's does bedded by close usually, I would have been able to film him for 15 minutes at 30 yards and got good footage and smashed him earlier in the night. But where I put the Noviks out further, kind of used the walk around to not visually be seen, I didn't get any footage really because he was covered up with pines and some warm season grass and stuff. I couldn't film back that direction. He sat in this end of the plot before he worked into the prime time. So some good, some bad. I guess the good is I got him. Bad is not really good footage. So, but the reverse could have been either I got him with good footage or I bumped them all.
Sure.
It's just a kind of a risk reward calculation, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I guess, you don't have a chance if you bump him right away.
That's true.
I know, and he's not going far. We were talking about there's a river that borders this property. I didn't feel like he was going to, and a lot of the big timber and bedding and sanctuaries on the other side of the river. So a lot of deer don't mind crossing a river every day and going back to the other side. But him, I just felt like he wouldn't want to do it with that leg.
Sure.
So it's like he's definitely in this section on our side. So I know where he's at, know where he's moving through consistently. I don't want to bump him out of there.
Yeah, and that's a deeper river too.
Yeah.
Brian, one of the things that we talk about a little bit is water during late season. I know that you can probably see one, if not two water holes there from where you're sitting. Are those water holes frozen? Are they open? And are the deer using them? And if they're frozen, are they trying to get to them?
Oh, they're trying pretty hard to get into them. They're frozen right now. I actually saw an 8-pointer last night that was filming some deer on the other side of me, but looked over my shoulder, and 8-pointer walking out on top of one of the ponds, and there's no snow on it, so they are absolute glass. And he scared the entire herd for a brief moment by slipping on it and landing on its side on the ice. But they're pawing at it or hoofing at it and trying to get into the edges where the warmth of the earth heats it up, and trying to just get those little drops of water around the edge. But it's pretty frozen solid right now.
Gotcha. Have you ever thought about trying to go in and break some of that ice?
It'd be awfully loud, but I mean, no, not really. They've got a natural water source down below if they really need it with the cold trout stream that runs the bottom portion of the property, but more so they're just looking for that sip while they're eating. I don't think that I would want to be pounding on the ice at this time of the year with a couple potential shooters within an earshot on these different bedding cells that kind of surround the plots.
How much water do you think these deer are getting from the moisture that the brassicas or these greens are holding? And how much, do you think how adequate do you think of a water source that is for them now, late season? Do they still need other water? How much? Do you know anything about that?
I think that they're getting a good portion of moisture, not necessarily, because they still, when they're eating, even if it's these, they're still super green rye and oats right now, and even the clovers are still very green. They're not dried out or anything like that. They're getting good moisture from the plants, but when they're eating, they still want to wash that down with a sip, and that's why those water holes surround that plot. And you see it as they'll be out there feeding for a half hour, and every deer will walk to one of those ponds and just see if there's an opening around the outside. And if there's not, then they'll continue to move around their way.
Gotcha. JJ, what piece of advice do you have for Brian? Anything that he's doing or not doing right now that he should be doing to try to fill this tag here in the next 2 weeks?
I think it just comes down to time, getting time in there, but you got limited time with some stuff you got going on with your family. So, they're showing up. He's in the game. It's warm. It's green.
Yep.
That's a good thing. You got how many days left? What day is it today?
21st.
10 days left.
10 days left.
Yeah, I probably got 2, maybe 3 more sits the rest of the year with the health stuff we got going on at home. So, but get out as much as I can and keep grinding. If we don't fill the tag this year, we're going to have some bigger bucks next year.
That's right. All you need is one of those sits.
Yeah. Every night, though, I'm seeing 2 and 3 year olds that are, I just get excited for the 2024 season, seeing all these young potential bucks coming up. And, having the restraint to not shoot some of them is, you get that itch. You got that tag burning a hole in your pocket, but I'm just as fine looking through the lens at them.
JJ, what's kind of your focus right now? So you're tagged out in Wisconsin. You still got a buck tag here in Minnesota. You got 10 days left. What's your thought process on the whole thing?
Yeah, I was going to hunt this buck late because the season was open through January in Wisconsin, but Minnesota closes here at the end of the month. So now that I'm tagged out on the later season with the Wisconsin, in Minnesota, I still don't have a shooter. We got bigger bucks score-wise than Longhorn, but, at this point of the year, it's like they're pretty close to making it through. Hate to shoot something that could be really something special next year. So that's kind of been my mindset the past month. It's like there's just a lot of deer I'm excited for next year on a lot of deer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So and then your mind's like, well, what should we do different? I keep thinking, I want to plant some of this here. I want to do this here. I want to do this here. I keep thinking about your spot, like, man, we got to get some standing corn up there.
Yeah.
Get a little bit more screening, wrap those plots, break them up.
Yeah, I'm excited to this is really the first year that we've had that big plot rolling on not really all scales, but we've had food throughout the entire plot this year. And there's so much that, I sit in that 360 just envisioning on what I want to do next year with different food sources and, like he was saying, screening around the area and even more water holes throughout the property.
So JJ, I got a question for you, but I was just sitting here thinking, this is the year of the term long, I guess. We got Long John, Chris Shot, you got Longhorn. Brian, you're having a long season. This is your society long year.
Yeah.
But so my question to you is, let's look at the whitetails from scratch property. Looking at it now, experiencing it the whole season, Do you think that there is anything that you could have done differently to change the outcome of your season on the Whitetails from Scratch Farm?
I can't pick out anything. We kept it low key. We had all the food. We got all the bedding. It just came down to a lot of bucks that were on the edge of shooter and not shooter. We didn't really want to shoot anything, to be honest. We were waiting on some bigger ones to show up late season, but then you look at this late season, it's not one that's going to move deer from one property to the next unless they're injured. Typically, the snow gets deep. That's where our property shines because of the standing beans, standing corn. Like, we prepare for late season, but we don't really have that this year. I wouldn't really do anything different. I just think it's one of those years, a lot of bucks got shot. I just think it's one of those, I feel like in the short history of the property, there's been 2 years where a lot of bucks, for whatever reason, the weather or the rut times up with the gun season or what it is, but a lot of bucks get shot just because of how things line up. And that's just kind of what happened this year. A bunch of 3-4-year-olds got shot. Still some decent ones left, but not that upper age class. Even the one that I was hoping would make it for late season got shot during the rut too, about a mile off. So it's kind of one of those things. That's where having options is good. Like, you get different, we got some permission properties to hunt, just have different options because there's not always a big boy walking around on every property.
No doubt.
The one thing that I want to do next year, or convince JJ to do next year on the Whitetails from Scratch property, is get some bigger ponds.
Yeah.
Now that I've implemented some that hold, something that you don't have to refill every couple weeks.
Yeah, that's definitely on the list.
Those ones that we put in this year, around like 2,500 gallons a piece, and when you bring in a couple tanks and fill them at the beginning of the year, and the natural rainfall takes care of it the rest of the way, like, there's nothing better, especially early season. Like, prior to the 2-3 weeks before the rut really kicks in, every deer is hitting that water hole every single night.
Yeah. Brian, I'm going to ask you the same question. So you got a tag in your pocket, hopefully not a tag in your pocket here in 10 days.
Yeah, hopefully not tomorrow.
Looking back at it, is there anything that you would do differently, or you think that you could have done differently that would have changed the outcome of where you sit right now?
With the year that my family has been through with the health struggles that we've had at home with our kids, I don't think I could have really invested any more time into hunting than I did. I'm glad that I got out the times that I did, but I think that as far as the strategy wise, it would be sticking to certain stands when I have a solid pattern built. Yeah, I was bouncing around a lot, and I was trying to anticipate where this deer would be moving rather than going to the spot that he was consistently going and hunting the outskirts of that area. But that's one thing that I would have changed, is those sits that I got to sit during the heat of the rut, sticking with what you guys were telling me here at the shop rather than going with my gut.
Yeah, there was that 1 week where
there was that 1 week, yeah,
consistent on that water hole.
Yeah, literally every single day at the exact same time every day, but I hunted around it, hoping not.
Wind changes and it's hard to get in.
That's true, and there was a lot of east winds that week, and the bedding cell that I know that most deer go to on that side of the property was not ideal for access right there. But then I did sit there a couple nights, and I ended up seeing him 2 of the 3 or 4 sits that I had in that stand, but definitely, 70, 80 yards away, hot on does.
I think it's funny, and I want to touch on that real quick because I think that happens a lot, and there's obviously a lot of variables that go into it, and I'm not saying don't go with your gut because I'm a huge believer in going with your gut, and I don't think that you made the wrong move anytime. But I do think this happens, and I see it with a lot of different people because I get to hunt with a lot of different people and see different strategies all over. Including myself, we get this mindset of like, oh man, like didn't get that exact picture. Like the deer could dare like 4 days in a row, and maybe the 5th day he doesn't do what you think he's going to do, and then you come up with this intense game plan. It's like, oh well, he must be doing this, and you anticipate what you think he's going to do, and you play these strategies out a million ways in your mind. And I think sometimes we not mess up, but I think, and I'm saying this because I know I do this, like, and I've seen other people do it. Sometimes you give these deer too much credit. Like, and I don't mean credit, but I mean you overanalyze what they're doing. Like, I think sometimes you have to go with the most basic, raw, recent intel that you have and hunt that way. Like, not try to make up, because it's easy to do and it's fun to do. And as a creative person, you know, you're like, oh, he must be doing this, and I understand this because he must be going here. And it's like, sometimes I think you have to not overcomplicate it, simplify it, and say, look, here's what the deer is doing. Here's where I need to go sit and hunt, you know, rather than trying to make up this insane anticipation game plan. So I'm not saying that that's something that you should do every time, but I do think that sometimes we have a tendency to overanalyze and chase what we think a deer is going to do instead of just stepping back and saying, hey, look, this is what the deer is doing. Here's why it's doing it. I'm going to go sit here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and when I overanalyze things, it's always coming down to access and wind. How am I going to get into that stand without bumping him off the property and not seeing him again?
Yeah, even this buck here, you know, I saw him 3 times in person, didn't get a picture for a while there, so it's like, I didn't know how he was getting to this spot, but you asked me earlier why that Novix was there. It's because that's where he just kept showing up. It's like, how did you get there? I don't know. Trying to guess that, like, where was he bedded? How did he get there? How am I going to hunt? At the end of the day, maybe just sit where you see him. That's how I got him. So I zigzagged him probably a little bit too much. I hunted the beans, then he was at the greens, and then I went over here, and he went over there, and he didn't show up.
Oh, that sounds
It's like, I'm just going to keep sitting in this primetime spot until he shows up.
That sounds like Lemke's season on the big guy, too, here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I mean, sitting here in the shop when we were looking at that every morning, get him on trail camera here. He's spinning around this bowl, you know?
Yeah. Well, the craziest thing about that deer was, like, that whole middle of that property at that point was all standing corn. And he was going to be on the north at night, and the south that night, and the east. And, like, he was walking through 100 acres. He's on either side of 100 acres of standing corn. And I'm like, in just a few hours, I'm like, how is he getting around there? Because we had cameras on the edges of it. And it wasn't like, because you said it, you're like, well, why don't you just pick an edge and say he's got to walk down the edge at some point? But it was like, we had cameras there. We weren't getting him on cameras. Is he walking through 100 acres of corn to get from the north to the south? Can't be. But it was mind-boggling. Like, I don't know how he was getting back and forth. Still don't know.
And sneaky.
But, you know, I want a late season tactic here. You know, Andrew had a buck last year, a couple years ago. It was the same kind of thing. Like, he's like, man, where's this deer coming from? And he's bouncing around. He's hunting these different spots. But he'd see him out in the middle of this. And it was cut beans. We had snow. It was cold. But see him in the same spot all the time. And finally, he said, screw it. I'm going to stop figuring out, bouncing around. I'm just going to go put a blind in the middle of this wide open field, try to cover it up with white and snow and whatever else, and hay bales, and get in there. And that's when he had a pretty close encounter with that deer. As he went to, this is that spot that deer was showing up. It was less of like, okay, trying to figure out what it is. I know this is the end point. So go sit in that end point, and ended up not getting them, but, you know, had a pretty close encounter with them there, I think. So,
well, let's throw the question back at Lemke over here. What would you do different this year?
Yeah, right. Couple 180s.
A lot change.
Honestly, in a dream world,
You'd have someone filming you when you shot him, so you didn't have to see it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Connor filmed me that one in Iowa. In a dream world, I would like to have sticker 10 of my Minnesota bucks still walking around. That's what I would change. Let me step back.
That's a bold statement.
I wouldn't change that. I would not shoot him. And I'm super fortunate and super blessed to have shot him.
And he would have been shot if you didn't shoot him.
And he would have been shot more than likely.
People say that, but he would have.
There was enough people hunting him. The corn came off the right time. With our gun seasons the way they were, how regular I knew he was last year, he would have gotten shot.
Yeah.
I guess it's more of a wish than anything. Like, I would have I would love to see what that deer did even having another year. And I liked waking up every day going, where's that deer on trail camera, or the strategy part of it. Like, I missed that the day after that I shot him, you know? So as far as what I would change, I don't know. I can't think of anything that I would really change about it. Other than that, it was kind of one of those years. There's pretty much every other year I can say one thing this I would change, whether it was, you know, the way I set up, accessed, hunted. You could say that about every year. This year it was just like kind of all the stars lined and you know, it was pretty good.
It was fun watching you strategize that every morning, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it was fun. So, anything else you want to talk about late season wise? Where do we transition after this? You know, it's crazy to sit here and think about, like, we're counting down the last days of the season, and you know, it's like, where do we go from here? Like, do we start thinking about shed hunting? Do we start thinking about, you know,
shoot some does for sure?
Yeah.
Clary needs to shoot some does. We're going to shoot some does.
How do you?
Populations are high.
Yeah.
Yep.
A week for that. But.
How do you know when you need to shoot does?
When you see 25 does.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Well, I'm seeing boxes, just young ones. I would say I need to shoot does. And I encourage people that have high doe populations to shoot does just to even out that buck to doe ratio. But I mean, I bet on my property, it's anywhere between 10 to 15 to 1 on doe to buck ratio.
Shoot some does.
Yeah.
I guess that leads us down another path of, we said we were going to talk about it a little bit, this second rut,
Yep.
or second estrus cycle. What's everybody's thoughts? JJ, I guess I'll start with you. Like, what do you think about, you know, second rut, 28 days or so after the first one, you know, into December, whether it's young does coming in for the first time or mature does recycling if they didn't get bred. Have you seen much of that, and what's your thought on it?
I don't analyze too much about second rut, but I know a lot of people have been asking me about second rut this year, and I don't know. I always look at it like when the weather gets real cold, their mindsets change, and sometimes that's mid-November, and the bucks are just on food hard. This year's warm. It's a really strange year. So bucks are still hitting scrapes. You see them, even yesterday I got a pretty cool picture on the reveal where this buck has his nose down, and he's basically dogging a doe through the plot.
Yeah, I filmed one doing one.
It's like, is any of that just weather? I know it's not, the estrus cycle it's not based on weather, but that kind of those actions or that mindset, you know, do the bucks still think like, oh, it's nice and warm out, it's still kind of like the rut, I'm going to keep chasing even though maybe, is there any of that where you just see more of it because it's warm? More signs of it? I don't really know.
Yeah, and I've looked at this before and I've read a lot of articles on it, but from what I've learned from different like deer farms and stuff like that, of people that actually breed the animals, is deer will come into a second estrus cycle if they don't get bred, and you have to kind of fold the page over to wild deer in nature. If you're in like my spot, for instance, where it's really heavy doe population, if there's not enough bucks to breed all of those does, that doe still wants to get bred. And when she comes back into that second estrus cycle to have that opportunity to do it again, that's maybe where these bucks are still dogging, trying to find those does that didn't get bred the first time around.
Yeah. You know, I think that I've always looked at the second rut as like, you know, you believe in it, right? Like you want to believe in Santa Claus. And I'm not saying it's, but it's like, it's an exciting thing if you still get a tag, a tag in your pocket, because it's like, you know, oh, maybe second rut's going to come in. Maybe that's a glimpse of hope. I do think it happens.
I don't know if that's the right way to call it though, as a second rut. I think that's what I'm. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's like we don't see it the same way as we see the first rut. The first rut is because there's an abundance of does coming in. All of the bucks are looking. Mm-hmm. I think the second estrus cycle, I guess, if you will, is so small, right? There's so many less deer doing it that, yeah, there are instances, if you're around one, that you see a little flurry of it. Mm-hmm. But to call it a second rut is hard because you don't see this abundance of it happening, right? And I think
I've never been fortunate enough to really see it too much. I mean, I've seen maybe little flurries of it or little inklings of it where you could say, hey, maybe. But I think it's, and when that happens, I think it's here and gone pretty quick. It's not a thing that lasts a couple weeks. It's like, oh, flurry gone. That's just personal experience.
And the other thing, I think it's less common than you think, I think, because, for instance, when you're looking at your trail cameras in August, how many fawns do you see that still have spots? Very few, but you will sometimes see them. And those, I'm guessing, are the does from the previous year that came into that estrus cycle a month and a half later.
Yep.
I mean, I've looked at that, and I've seen, I think it was 2 years ago that I had a fawn with spots after the first snowfall in October in Minnesota here. And I was like, this is completely strange, and that deer is not going to make the winter because it is so tiny still.
Yeah, maybe we don't see it as much because it's so cold, condensed. So if those fawns are born too late, then they might not make the winter. Mother Nature kind of squeezes the rut a little bit tighter.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about mainly experience from up here in the upper Midwest.
Yeah, the upper Midwest. It might be completely different down in, Louisiana or Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, their ruts are definitely different times, and they can run a long time. We talked about it, I think, last podcast or a couple before, but Joe Miles, he's like, man, our rut lasts forever. Like, he starts hunting rut tactics, I think, like end of September and hunts them all the way through February. So, but I think you're right. Mother Nature has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, time constraint on keeping a viable, healthy fawn out.
No doubt. Well, we're going to wrap this thing up. Brian's got to get to the tree stand. Tag Phil tonight? Call your shot?
I hope so. I got to make a call home, but looking positive that I'll be able to get out tonight, so I'm excited.
Well, good luck. Hopefully we can have another podcast here next week with another buck sitting here different than Longhorn. But wrapping this one up, JJ, congratulations. Beautiful deer.
Yeah,
coming in clutch towards the end here. We had faith in you. But guys, thanks for listening. If you're still out there grinding, good luck. Send us those photos. Make sure if you're watching on YouTube, you subscribe. Download the free Deer Society app. Lots of great content on there, instructionals, hunt breakdowns, lots of good stuff. And have a great holiday. Merry Christmas. And looking forward to the new year. So thanks for tuning in.
All our sponsors here at Deer Society are partners whose equipment we know we can trust are going to make you more successful and have a better experience in the field. Products like Illusion Systems, maker of the Black Rack, the Extinguisher, and the Phase Body Odor System. Tacticam, Reveal Cell Cameras, 10-Point Crossbows, Onyx Maps, Osseo Gear, Hooyman, and Big Frig.